We are an intensive outpatient program for teenagers who are struggling with mental health and drug and alcohol issues. We're located in Santa Clarita. And every Monday at 2 p.m., we have this show where we are talking about issues related to teen mental health. So it's the Insight Teen Hour. And this week, we have a guest in the studio who's going to help me talk about a very important topic, which is disappointments and hurts in relationship between parents and their teens. So we often have families in our program that starts our program where the parents have experienced a lot of disappointment, right? The teens have made some unhealthy choices. The teens have maybe holding on to secrets, have done things behind the parents' back. The parents have repeatedly trusted the teens and sort of given it another chance before they reach out to us at Insight. The idea is that often parents are coming in with a long history of feeling that basically they're disappointed or they're hurt about some of the choices that the teens have made in the past. And it's often in an intensive outpatient program like ours, it's of course very important that we work with the whole family, that we work with the parents and help them work their way through some of this. So, but Rena Pollack, who I've invited into the studio today. Hey, Rena, and welcome to the program.
Hi, Frederik. I'm just going to correct you that it's Rena.
Oh, sorry, Rena. You're right.
That's right. It looks like Rena on paper.
True. But Rena has private practice in Encino and is sort of she's an LMFT, right, Rena?
Yes.
And has a lot of focus, I know, on relationship and relationship building in your private practice.
Absolutely.
That's sort of one of your specialties. And I feel we can all learn a lot from some of the experiences and some of the approaches you have with this, and that's why I think it's awesome to have you on the show today. Thank you very much for taking your time and coming in.
Sure, thanks for having me come in. I'm happy to be here.
Of course. Rena, maybe before we start with all the harder stuff, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, how come you're so interested in this field about helping families build relationships internally, and how did you get into the field? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I actually started out my career journey as an actress, which is very much about relationships and understanding people's internal motivations and their internal dialogues, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, why they choose to act the way they do. So it seemed like a very understandable transition into therapy because there was always a fascination with people and how they feel and how they strive to live their best lives and make the mistakes they make and engage in relationships. So I moved into therapy a little later in life. And as a marriage and family therapist, our stated purpose is to look at relationships between people, but also one's relationship with themselves. And there's been so many studies done that have proven that it really is the quality of our relationships that indicate the quality of our life. And so I'm just very attracted to, how to help people and how to help myself have the best quality of relationships for my life journey.
Yeah, and I mean, now that we're always dealing with teenagers, right, it's sort of an interesting part of, because on one hand, you want to have a relationship with your teens, right? But in nature, of course, also teenagers are at a stage in their life where they're trying to break with the relationships in certain ways, right, that they have with their parents. So it's sort of this funny period of time, right, in the family where on one hand, the teens needs, or the parents and the teen needs to have a relationship and build a relationship. But at the same time, it's also a time where the teenagers are going to go out and find new relationships and be dependent
Absolutely.
on peer support and, break from the traditional relationships in the home to a certain extent.
Absolutely. I don't think the teens want to destroy the relationship. I don't think they want to have the relationship disappear. It's because that would be very ungrounding for them to suddenly be alone in the world, not having the support of their parents. But they do have to, it's like an unconscious motivation to break the dynamics of the relationship from, being the child to becoming an adult, becoming peers even with their parents. So that can be a rough patch for some parent-child relationships to go from that power, to change that power dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. Even a lot of teens are sort of, of course, expressing, I don't care about, mom and dad are divorced and dad moved to Arizona and I don't care about my relationship with dad anymore. He hasn't been in my life for a while and I don't care. But of course they care. And of course it is important
Right.
to have some sort of relationships, even when it's not, perfect and even when it has a lot of scratches and dents in it. I think it is important as part of getting through some of these things that the teens are struggling with, whether it's depression or anxiety or self-harming behavior or suicidal ideations or drug use.
Yeah.
I think it is extremely important to understand what relationship that you need and how to get there and how to build that up, right? Whatever that's going to look like.
Yeah.
And obviously not everybody is the same.
Sure.
But, and in your private practice, Rena, sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say that what strikes me about that is when someone says, I don't care, you could look at it as a survival skill. To not care is a way to survive the hurt of it not being what you would like it to be. I can't, I'm going to not care as a way to insulate my heart from the loss of what I wish it could be. So I just want to throw that in.
No, but you're absolutely right? It's the way to shut down the emotional world and disconnect from the feelings that are hurting so much. And for many teens, it's usually something that has been hurting for a while, right? It's not something that just, the relationship didn't just go south in 2 weeks, right? It's usually something that has built up. And the teen usually feels not understood and feels alone and feels that they're not being supported, right? That's why it can be so hard to build up the relationship.
And the teen doesn't know, well, how do I alter this relationship so that it is satisfying in the way that I would like it to be? They've probably tried in different ways growing up from a childlike perspective. They've tried to make the relationship satisfying, but you get to a point where you don't know what to do, so you just stop caring.
Absolutely. That's the hard part. But if we should go in, Rena, so as I started saying, you probably have a lot of parents that show up that is talking about, hey, how can I ever get a relationship with my teen again? They have been maybe lying behind my back. They have, they keep defying all my, they show me day in and day out that they don't care for my life because they choose to do something else than what I'm advising them to do. And, they don't care about my religion anymore. They don't care about whatever it might be. But sort of, I would imagine you have a lot of parents that show up that really has a hard time even grasping where should I even start? Like, what am I going to do here? How do you usually approach that in your private practice?
Well, I do have a lot of background in cognitive behavioral therapy, so that is the idea that it's our beliefs and our thoughts that affect how we behave. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand and helping the clients understand what is it I'm feeling? What is it that I think is happening here? what are the beliefs that are causing me to feel so sad? And what are the losses? So I was thinking, when you have a child, it's even exploring what is the parent-child relationship. I mean, we kind of go down this path because the generation before did it and the generation before. But for each of us, it's a new experience. What are my expectations of being a parent? What are my expectations of this relationship and this child? Am I laying a whole bunch of beliefs on how this is supposed to feel and what is this supposed to be and who my child is supposed to be? And those expectations can cause a lot of pain. And so I really help parents come to understand, how did they think this was going to go, and are they disappointed with it going differently than they thought it would? For example, I was an athlete and I expected my child to be an athlete like me, and they're totally into video games, and they don't want to move a muscle, and so it's an exploration of, those dreams, those expectations, and the loss of those dreams as well. And can we give up some of these fantasies of how it's supposed to be in order to really see the beautiful things about what is this child, what is this relationship, what is this experience of being a parent? So I kind of do an exploration of those things with the parents.
Yeah, I think that is extremely important, right, to get that out in the open and talk. I feel we have a lot of parents who wouldn't be able to put words on it straight away,
Yes,
who hasn't really had time or energy to give it those deeper thoughts about, okay, what is it actually that I'm explaining, that I am expecting from my team, right? We actually, it's a little fun, Rena, but at our facility in Santa Clarita, we have this big warehouse space where, it's like a clubhouse feel. And there's this big wall, and the counselors and the kids were, when we first opened, were painting this wall and making it a mirror. And what it is today is it has all these lines, all these drips going from the ceiling and sort of dripping down towards the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it says in big letters on top, it says, every drip tells a story. And what the kids and the counselors wanted to illustrate to people that come in is that, look, every kid has its own journey. Every teen has its own journey. Some kids will make a straight line down to the floor. Some will only, will curve and only make it halfway down. But basically the idea is that I think there needs to be there needs to be a lot of support and education to parents about, hey, look, what are your expectations, as you say, compared to what is happening right now, and how does that make you feel, right? A lot of parents are very scared that if the kids are not following the drip or the line that they expected or that they were, sort of anticipating, then this is going to mean it is going to, ruin their world. They never going to make it. It's a catastrophe. But I think the acceptance of, hey, look, sometimes the kids have a different journey than what we expect. And it's important that we can accept that and can sort of emotionally go with that. So we don't start fighting it too much.
Right. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you mentioned fear. Because I think a lot of the trouble comes from fear. The fear comes out of love. Loving your child, wanting them to have a good life, wanting them to be successful and happy, and the fear that they're going to make a mistake and they're going to mess it all up and things are going to be bad for them. And so it's also a lot of exploration of these ideas that have developed in the parents' lives, probably handed down from their parents, of how we're supposed to live in order for things to turn out right. And the truth is that there may be some things that there may definitely be some things that people have learned over time that are helpful for, you eat healthy, you get good sleep, you move your body. These are beneficial for your life. But there's also so many things that are out of our control that, or I should say it this way, there are so many ideas of how we're supposed to live that are not necessarily going to keep us safe or make sure we have a perfect outcome in our lives. And that's when I think parents can get in a lot of trouble, when they think you've got to, it goes beyond the health and, the diet and food and exercise, and it goes to, you have to be a straight A student. You have to be on the student council. You have to, go to school to become a lawyer. All these ideas of what's going to make a happy life. And the parents fear that if they don't follow that blueprint, they're going to suffer. And it doesn't give the children much elbow room to find their own way to live and their own way to find their happiness and their individuality. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also feel that often, and that's, of course, something that you will be exploring, but often parents have their own history, right? That they're scared of, so to speak.
Yeah.
Often parents are maybe struggling with anxiety themselves or have been diagnosed with something that the kids have, they're also struggling with, right? And the parents just wants to fight, of course, really hard and work really hard for the kids not having to experience the same trouble with that as they might.
Yes.
And, and they obviously are fearful, if we should use that word, which I think it is a great word because it is such a common thing. But if they are very fearful of the kids going down in the same direction, they're going to fight really hard to avoid that, and not knowing that, hey, this is why I have these strong feelings about certain things. It's because of my own experience and because of my own things that I've never maybe processed or have time or ability to address.
Yeah, it's super important for parents to understand how much of themselves and their past is affecting their fears and expectations for their child, and to realize, this is so hard to realize, but to realize that your child is not you, and they're growing up in a very different situation. And there's so much projection of they're going to have the same painful experiences as me, where they may never. But all that fear that goes in there, just, it really creates a lot of force. And it actually sometimes creates the situations you're looking to avoid. If, for example, I'll just share an example. I have a friend who just had a lot of trouble with peers and sort of a really dominant female, group. And so she didn't want her daughters to be, dominated. And in some ways, she really encouraged them to be the one to ostracize others in order to avoid the painful experience that she had being ostracized in her girl group. She kind of taught her girls how to be the bully, basically, instead of be the bullied. And it's just a projection of her experience onto her girls, hoping it'll make it come out right, but it has its own problems. So, being able to step back and kind of leave them be, let them have their own experience. It is going to be different. They're maybe growing up in a different town. They're definitely growing up in a different time,
Yep, and that's scary, right, to let go and sort of give in a little bit and allow for things to play out. Rena, sorry, but we already are at a point where we need to go into a little break. So we'll take a quick little break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, And this is the Insight Teen Hour every Monday between 2 and 3 p.m. We'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll talk more about how to build up trust in your relationship and to your teens, and how fearful it can be to sort of let it go and work on some of your own issues as a parent. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. My name is Frederik. I'm from Insight Treatment Programs, and here in the studio today, I got Rena Polak, LMFT with private practice in the Valley, and with a lot of experience in working with families on their relationships in the marriage or with their teens. So, Rena, today we were obviously talking about the relationship with their teens and how you're supporting parents on making sure that they actually see their teens for who they are and for what is going on. I know here in the break we talked a little bit about how important it is for parents to really be able to see their child more clearly sometimes. They might be fearful. They might have barriers up that doesn't allow for them sometimes to feel or to see their child. So tell us a little bit about why that's so important and how you potentially are working with parents on opening their eyes to, who their child really are and what the needs the child really has emotionally.
Yeah. Well, to start with, I just want to say that sometimes it's very difficult to look at to see our child because we have the lens of our own desires, like what we want, how we want them to be, how we think they should be, our own experiences, and also from our adult brains. So I wanted to share just a few ideas about how to actually see them. And I have two little quick stories. One was when my daughter was very small, like 5 or 6, and we were lying in bed, and she said, "I wish I had my sippy cup." And I pretended to take a sippy cup out of an invisible refrigerator above the bed. And she really wasn't sure that I didn't. I mean, she looked at me and stunned and said, "Really?" And that was a moment when I went, "No, not really. I'm pretending." But I realized, my God, this child's brain really doesn't know the difference yet between imaginary and real. And it was such a wonderful wake-up call to remember, because we human beings, we always tend to believe that people think just the way we do, but they don't. They have their own ways of viewing the world or seeing things, and so that was a great wake-up call to see the child is growing, their brain is not fully developed, and our teens can really, really fool us because they look like adults. I mean, some of them really are, 6 feet tall, and they're huge, and so you start looking at them and thinking that they should have the same cognitive abilities, and they're also extremely brilliant. So I'm not knocking their intelligence at all, but the brain does not stop developing until 21. And there are parts that are they're not quite where we're at. In fact, I can remember opening up my diary from when I was 15 and being shocked at the things that I thought. Like, my mom was such a pain for asking me to bring in the groceries after I've been sleeping all day. The kind of like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was so selfish and completely oblivious to her, helping out. But I also, another example of this was I was working at a high school, and I was working with a young man who wore a leather jacket, and he had a mustache, and he was big, and I'm talking to him about his girlfriend. Oh, he told me he had his girlfriend, and all of a sudden I went, wait a second, how old are you? And he told me he was 15. And I realized I had been thinking of him like he was an adult. He was still very innocent with his girlfriend. It was like hand holding and, a little kissing. And I just didn't know. And I said, wow, I'm so sorry. I forgot. and I thought you were an adult. And he said to me, yeah, I mean, people always treat me like I'm a 21-year-old criminal when I'm really just a 15-year-old screw up.
Yes, good point.
Yeah. So for parents to try to remember they are still a child, their brain is still developing. The things you might see, don't worry that it's going to last forever. They're in the process. They're not, you know, like don't label them. Oh, he's selfish. You know, she's selfish. They're in. They're not done. That's just a part of the story. So that's one thing. Just to be aware, they're growing, they're developing, they're trying on different behaviors, they're trying on different perspectives and thoughts. And the other thought I had was, you know, it's a beautiful thing when you have a moment where you actually see your child as a separate being and you get a sense of who they are. And there's so much you kind of think you know about them, but you realize, no, I don't really know them. I don't really know everything about them. They don't know everything about themselves either. But you look for, you know, what do I like about this person? Who is this person, you know? And you can try to have them help you know who they are. You know, take an interest in their music. What is it you like about this band or this rapper, whatever? What are their movie interests? You know, who they like at school? Kind of develop more of a fascination, I guess, with figuring out who they are and realize that they're doing the same thing. They're just trying on, like, what are my interests? So
the only thing, and I mean, I hear you, and I think that is a great idea, or it is a great thing, but it can also be so hard, right? As a parent, how was school today? It's fine, Mom. It's okay. Well, why do you like that? Why do you like that group? Just because. I mean, sometimes it's difficult for parents to really get the teens to open up, right, and to get the teens to explain to you what is going on, what they're thinking about, why they like certain things or don't like it. And often I feel as a parent it can be very hard to find the right timing. I know we often have to talk to parents about, hey, look, when the kid is coming out of school and you're picking them up and you're driving them home, it might be for you a perfect time to talk to them about how school was and which friends they're hanging out with and what they're doing. But maybe emotionally they are extremely tired at that point in time, and they've been holding it all together throughout the school day, right? And they just don't want to talk. They just want to go home. But then at 11 o'clock at night, when you're tired and you are 9 o'clock at night, when you want them to just do their own thing and you want to get the last few things done in the house before you have to go and go to bed, or that's when they maybe want to talk, right? And you are exhausted as a parent. So just to juggle that timing of it and those conversations can be very challenging sometimes, I think, as parents.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. You can't exactly have it on your timeline, and you can kind of begin to get a sense of, oh, you know what, they're a little more open after they've had a snack, or when they're done with homework at the end of the night, or I think maybe putting it out there, putting out the questions, and if it doesn't get picked up, just letting it go. I think it's important to keep asking so they know you're interested, even if they're not ready to respond right then. The repeated gestures of, like, I want to know about your world. And yeah, sometimes it's inconvenient, but sometimes, you know, when they come to you at 11 o'clock and that's when they want to share about what happened that day. But you know what? Their childhood is pretty darn short. And if you have to stay up late a couple nights to have these beautiful moments with your kid, it's really worth it. So
And
Yeah,
it is a
I
window of
know.
opportunity, right?
It
As a
really
parent, as a
is.
teenager, you don't get a lot of chances. You really don't, right? It's not that, oh, I can just do it tomorrow. Usually,
Yeah.
there are few there are few opportunities, and you better try and take them, even if it's
It,
really hard to do it in that moment.
yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Raina, what would you say, sort of, if you should generalize? What do you think is really the biggest things in the way for parents to really see their teens for who they are? Is it, in today's world, do you feel it is, is it fear? Is it the feeling of not being a good parent, sort of, the being stubborn, or
Mhm.
neglecting what's really going on? Is it the inability to be emotionally present?
Mhm.
Because we're so stressed as a parent all the time, and because there are so big expectations to us at the
Yes.
moment in this world. What do you, if you should sort of generalize, what do you think is the biggest
Well, I would say all of the above are really true. Um, I guess it's different for different people, but we are very busy. It feels like our culture is just working all the time, just not
obstacle?
having enough. And then if you have a bunch of activities, it's really hard to have just downtime where um, you don't have to be doing anything. Those are the moments when things can just potentially open up and be present to each other. I think that there is a whole lot of pressure on parents to be, and parents' ego is involved. Like, am I good? Am I doing this right? You know, am I going to screw up my kid? There's a lot of fears about a parent's skills,
Hmm.
that gets in the way of just embracing, like, I'm doing the best I can, I'm just going to be here. I don't have to fix them every moment. I don't have to be perfect either. I can just have some downtime to be with this human being.
Hmm.
Um, I heard this thing once. I thought it was really interesting. It said, all parental love is narcissistic. And I don't completely agree with that. I think the idea was that we love our child primarily as a reflection of ourselves. Like,
Hmm.
oh, look, I made that. I made that beautiful creature. I made that talented person.
Hmm.
I don't think it's entirely true, but I think there is a core of truth in that if we can get out of our ego about how they do in life, or not beat ourselves up for their journey, we can appreciate them more just as people.
Yeah, would make us feel more free, right? To just
Make us
enjoy.
feel more free. And it
Yeah.
makes me wonder if that kind of pressure on your child isn't just a reflection of that kind of pressure on yourself to be the perfect person, the perfect parent. You know, it,
Hmm.
like, what goes around comes around. If you can love and accept yourself and be generous with doing the best you can, it's easier to be loving and generous and with your child that they're doing the best they can.
Absolutely. Even when it doesn't look that way, and even when when it is hard, right?
Yeah,
Even when
yeah.
you feel, oh, they're doing everything to despite me, they're not following any of the guidance, they're
Mhm.
making it so much harder for everybody in the family, um,
Yeah.
by
Some
making
kids
some of
just
these
seem
choices.
to some kids just seem to need, for whatever unconscious reason, to do it the hard way. It's like they have to suffer it themselves. They can't just hear, like, if you do this, you'll feel better. They got to find out
Sure.
for themselves that it doesn't feel good.
Correct. And that's part of being a teenager, right? You
Mhm.
need to try some things out yourself. You can't just
Mhm.
read it all in a book and follow it from there. But that's
Mhm.
actually a great segue. I know here in the break, Raina, you said something about boundaries and how it's a little bit of a paradox, right? How you often would be helping parents set boundaries, hard boundaries, to create a better relationship. Because I think the concept is you would, when you're having these discussions with parents and guiding them through, you often would get to a point where you're going to support them and help them set some healthy boundaries and hold on to those boundaries. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that, about, why is it so important to hold boundaries, and obviously why it does not contradict that you're actually creating a better relationship. Like, how come that the relationship potentially is going to be better by holding some hard boundaries and setting those up and holding the teams accountable?
I think, how they say good fences make good neighbors. Well, I think good boundaries make good relationships. And what makes a good boundary is that it's very clear. Everyone can see what it is. What the opposite of that is, you hurt me, you betrayed me, you did this, and the person didn't even know what they were doing, that you had an expectation around that. They just feel like they're doing things wrong, but they didn't know they weren't supposed to do it. So that's an unclear boundary. So the clearer the boundaries, the more clear it is to the child, when they're breaking it or when they're not, I think it just actually makes us feel safer if we know where to cross, where not to cross. The other thing about boundaries is to explore, to really kind of explore them. As I'm talking to parents about understanding their needs, their expectations, their disappointments, it's also important to look in and say, what is this boundary I need? Is it really important, to clarify what's really important and what's just a little controlling, Because sometimes we have some very there are some people who are extremely boundaried. They've got a lot of, and maybe they need that for their sense of security. And sometimes some of those boundaries can come down and make it a little easier to flow. But it's very important to know, why do I really need this? Am I erecting a boundary that is unnecessary? Because if you have too many, it's like too many obstacles to cross, or too many ways to make a mistake. So it's important to figure out what do I really need from my kid? I need them to not call me names. They can't, drive under the influence. They are allowed to call me under the influence and ask for a ride home. Those are just some examples of, but I don't need a boundary around them wearing sloppy clothing to school. I mean, maybe some families do, and I'm just speaking from myself. I wouldn't have a power struggle over how my kid dresses.
No.
Unless it's, extremely inappropriate.
It's very important to choose your battles, right?
Exactly.
Rena, I'm sorry, but time is running. We need to take a little break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. So You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour, and we are talking about relationships with your teens and disappointments and hurt in the family or with parents in this process. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. I'm Frederik, and here in the studio, I have Rena Pollock, who is an LMFT down in Encino in the Valley. And Rena and I have been talking about, we are talking about parents and boundaries and why it's so important to set healthy boundaries to create actually a better relationship with your teens, right, Rena? And Rena, maybe you could, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, unfortunately, but maybe you could touch on the idea of how to talk to your teens about the boundaries. how would you suggest, or what advice can you give parents on how to actually have those conversations sometimes?
I think the overall message that you're trying to get through to your child, and a helpful way to approach it, is coming from the place of, I love you, I want to get along, I want to feel good, I want you to feel good, and can we figure out what we need in order for it to work best for both of us? So it's not coming from a place of, you're bad and you need to do this. It's coming from a, hey, how do we work together when we are sharing the same living space? And so then you share with your child what it is you need and why. I think the thing is, when people make sort of rules without helping the child understand why you need it, it feels very meaningless, and they just resent it. It just feels like the law. So if you can kind of open up to this is how it will work, and then even ask, would that be difficult for you? What do you need? And what do you need? Do you need anything from me to help you keep that boundary? Like, I'm asking you to be home at 11 o'clock at night. Can you do that? What's getting in the way? Is there anything I can do to help you? Do you want to need to allow you to take Uber? So that it's conversational. It isn't coming from a place of, I'm beating you up and I'm criticizing you. It's coming from a place of, like, how can we work together? Because I think anyone gets defensive when they're being told, like, you're bad.
Of course. And also, as we've spoken about, again, parents being authentic and knowing what it is that's driving their emotional world to need or want certain things in the family, right, is crucial. But unfortunately, Rena, the Inside Teen Hour has come to an end. We are...
well, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Rena, if any of the people out there or any of the parents out there who are listening, if they have any questions or concerns or would like to reach out to you, how can they get hold of you?
Sure. I can be reached at 818-245-5298. My website is www.renapollock.com. That's RENAPOLLAK.com. And I work with adults primarily and their relationships, both with their kids, with their spouses, with their coworkers, with themselves.
Well, keep up the great work, Rena, and thank you very much.
Thank you. You too.
Coming here tonight and helping out so many families. And, enjoy your afternoon.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. And next week we'll be back at KHTS 98.1 FM at the Insight Teen Hour from 2 to 3 p.m. So tune in again next Monday.